Many of us know dopamine to be a chemical that is created in the brain that is responsible for our well-being. In short, we want more of it. And when we don't have enough, issues like depression, fatigue, boredom, and lack of motivation begin to plague us. But what if I told you that there's much more to the story of this molecule of more? What if it's not only that too little dopamine can be problematic, but perhaps even more so, too much dopamine can cause even bigger issues? What if I told you that it is more about how we get our dose of this magic molecule that holds the secret to living a great life, rather than just how much we have of it? Well, let's take a look. Dopamine has been around since the beginning, but it was only recently discovered in the 1950s. Dopamine is directly tied to the things that make our lives exciting and worth living, such as motivation, movement, and the desire to do the tough things that we know will make us feel better. Somebody with low levels of dopamine, or as we'll see later, too much from the wrong sources, might feel a sense of meh around life. They'll typically have low energy, be poorly motivated to do things like work out, go on dates, excel at their work or school. They might find eating healthy food to be a burden, or they might even just struggle with getting out of bed each day. This clearly is not optimal. Well, what if I told you that we can trick our brains into developing an enjoyment for such things? Well, the truth is, we can. Let me explain. In this amazing video, Dr. Huberman, a neuroscientist, says that the problem is not pleasures. The problem is that pleasure experienced without the prior requirement of pursuit is terrible for us.
The problem is not pleasures. The problem is that pleasure experienced without prior requirement for pursuit is terrible for us. It's terrible for us as individuals. It's terrible for us as groups.
In today's world, there are infinite ways to find pleasure. We can eat foods both high in fat, which is calorically dense, and sugar, which is the most readily available source of energy. We can watch porn, we can binge Netflix, we can scroll endlessly through social media, we can constantly check our phone for notifications. The list truly goes on and on. Why is it then that if frequent doses of dopamine are so readily available to us, then why have mental illnesses and people struggling with loneliness skyrocketed almost simultaneously? Now, it is certain that this is multifactorial, but it begs the question, if we have access to so much more dopamine, then why don't we have more happiness, more motivation, and more desire to do the tough things in life that make us feel better? And the answer to that is simple. It's not about how much dopamine we have. It's about how we get the dopamine that makes all the difference. One could ask, well, what is the point of a molecule that gets us addicted to something in our environment? It doesn't really seem like a very intelligent move from an evolutionary perspective. And that's true, but you would be missing two key elements. Element one, the real purpose of dopamine is to establish the motivation to intentionally seek pain that will elicit a pleasure response. And element two, the prefrontal cortex region of our brains acts as the brake that governs our dopamine pathways. Without this, we would purely be pleasure-seeking creatures. This brain circuitry did not evolve to get us addicted. It evolved to give us the motivation to take action, to get water when we're thirsty, to go find food when we're hungry, to go search out a mate when we want to create a family. To really put this in perspective, let's take a look at exactly how much dopamine is released across a wide array of events. Right before we get out of bed each morning, our dopamine levels rise roughly 3 to 4% above baseline. When we're getting ready to eat a meal that we love, maybe it's steak, chocolate, pasta, ice cream, our dopamine levels can rise from 30 to 50% above baseline. And on the extreme end of the scale, someone who has taken a drug like cocaine or amphetamines, dopamine levels can rise over 1,000% above baseline. But now, we must explore the pleasure-pain trade-off we experience each time we get a hit of dopamine. The trade-off looks something like this. Each time you engage in something you enjoy, pleasure increases. But simultaneously, there is a pain response. And now you might be confused. Ty, I don't feel any pain when I eat chocolate, watch Netflix, or drink a can of my favorite soda. It actually makes me feel good. True. But it's not physical pain that I'm referring to here. It's pain in the sense that it leaves you wanting more, especially if your dopamine schedule is poorly managed. To make this obvious for you, I challenge you to sit down with your favorite movie and a big bowl of popcorn. But there's only one rule. You can only eat one piece of the popcorn for the entire length of the movie. Not physically painful, but Painful. This becomes way more obvious when we look at things like addiction. You need more each time to elicit the exact same response. And here's the catch. Each time you go back, there is a reduction in pleasure and an increase in pain. Okay, this is great. So what do we do?
Hey, everything okay, Stan? I don't know where I belong.
In a world filled with endless amounts of dopamine hits, we must make it a priority first off to understand that more dopamine is not always better. We must learn to manage, self-regulate, and be in control of our own personal dopamine schedules. And finally, we must come to terms with the fact that dopamine is designed for us to establish the motivation to intentionally seek out discomfort in order to elicit a pleasure response. For example, ice baths have been shown to increase dopamine by up to 250% and have an effect for up to 2 hours afterwards. Exercise of all sorts, including running, strength training, and yoga, have been shown to increase the amount of dopamine that is released while simultaneously upregulating the number of dopamine receptors in the reward center of the brain. One study showed how 8 experienced meditation teachers found a 65% increase in dopamine above baseline levels after a 1-hour meditation. And it doesn't always have to be super hard and uncomfortable. Frequent sunlight exposure has been shown to increase the amount of dopamine receptors we have in our brain. Getting a good night's sleep, particularly between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., have also been shown to increase the amount of dopamine receptors. As you can see, there's a ton of things that we can do to dramatically improve our levels of dopamine, both by limiting the things that don't require much effort, like chronic social media scrolling, frequent recreational drug use, and over-consuming foods that are high in both fats and sugars. And by increasing the amount of things that we do each day that do elicit a temporary feeling of discomfort, such as working out, meditation, getting a good night's sleep, or even asking someone out on a date. I hope you enjoyed today's video on dopamine. Please help me get this message out to more people by liking or leaving a comment below. I invite you to click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you get first access to more videos like these. Share this with as many people as you like, and for now, I'll see you next time.